Hello chess fans, Coach Jason here, and today I've got a treat for you, the Immortal game of the great Adolf Anderssen. In this game, Adolf Anderssen shows us how efficient piece development and dominating center control can overcome just about any odds. Let's go ahead and get into it. So this is a game between Adolf Anderssen and Lionel Kieseritzky. Well, actually, I don't think we have a picture of Lionel. Lionel Kieseritzky was a chess tutor for the Café de la Régence in Paris. And Adolf Anderssen was a math professor, but he also created his own chess puzzles. This was played during the World's Fair of 1851 in London. There was a great chess tournament going on, 16 of the strongest players in the world, and Adolf Anderssen and Lionel Kieseritzky were two of them. King's Gambit here, which many of my students have seen me play quite often, but it's not a super popular opening. People like to avoid it in order to stay away from tactics. But this game was played in the Romantic era, when most games were characterized by very aggressive attacks and tactics, and not a lot of positional play. And well, of course, they didn't have engines to help them find the best lines and memorize them. This move is not one that I normally play because I like to castle. I like to get my king safe, and this risks this move here. So most of my students will see me play this move instead. I like to get the bishop to c4. That's a great spot to have the bishop, but I always play knight to f3 first before I go about developing the bishop. There's a very good book by David Shank, The History of Chess. The Immortal game is kind of a backdrop for the plot of a very interesting book in chess history. So he doesn't play the knight move that I would play, and that leaves him open for this check. And now white will not be able to castle. There'll be no castling, so the king is going to be kind of more or less stuck there. But this is kind of a double-edged sword as well. This is not fantastic for black either. Hopefully all my students know that it's dangerous to bring your queen out so early, and that's what we're going to find here in this Immortal game. Lionel Kieseritzky, the tutor of the Regence, attacks this bishop, and this is actually, I think, called the Brian counter gambit. That's actually from David Shank in that history book. And the idea here is just to get this bishop off this strong diagonal. And so it's a gambit. He's giving up a pawn in order to kind of leave the bishop out in the open where he doesn't really belong. That's not a great square for the bishop anymore. He's undefended. He's not attacking that weak f7 square. So that's the idea there. So an excellent move by Kieseritzky here, attacking the center of the board and developing his knight. But now the issue with the queen being out so early, Adolf Anderssen gets to develop his knight with tempo. So kind of a happy move there. You attack my pawn. Well, I will see that threat and I will increase it. And that's what you got to do in chess. You got to, if you want to defend a piece by making a threat, you got to make sure that it is a stronger threat. Okay. And this fork, knight to g3. See, the pawn would not be able to capture the knight because, of course, the queen would be able to take a rook. Okay, so a pretty nasty threat, although pretty crazy piece development here. Both the pieces on the edge of the board, it kind of makes me a little sick. I don't like to see that. You know, we're trying to control the center of the board in the opening, and that's definitely not happening here. But yes, go ahead and pause your video and think about what you would do in this circumstance. Well, not sure what you all found, but Adolf Anderssen found kind of a crazy solution here. Adolf Anderssen, who is an extremely strong player, probably a grand master of his time, he also moves his knight to the rim, which seems insane. Look at all these pieces lined up on the rim, and we've got loose pieces here too. The bishop's loose, the knight's loose. seems insane. So it's black to move now. Take consideration what I always talk about. Those loose pieces, so checks, captures, loose pieces, semi-loose pieces, and think about what kind of move you might make here as black in this situation. So black to move, what would you do? You can go ahead and pause your video. There's a way to threaten both those pieces at the same time. You can threaten the knight and the bishop at the same time here. And now, most of the time in a situation like this, you're in trouble. I mean, that's why we don't want to have loose pieces all over the place that we're not accounting for. But Adolf Anderssen's he was a very bright man. Go ahead and pause your video. What would you do here playing for Anderssen as white? Math professor, so yeah, he's thinking, he's calculating, and he knew that he could deal with both problems at the same time with this brilliant move. Okay, so this is pretty interesting here. So the bishop is under threat. Anderssen ignores it and makes a threat of his own. So we're looking to trade a piece for a piece here. Anderssen's trying to build some momentum here, which of course he does. Adolf Anderssen, who actually ends up going on to win the London tournament of 1851, the one during the World's Fair. He just gives a piece. He drops a piece here. But, see what we have here. The queen is just so poorly placed that he's able to take advantage of the situation and really gain a lot of space. Super dangerous here. Bishop is threatening the pawn on f4, the queen is threatening the f4. Go ahead and pause your video and think about it, but what would you do in this situation? What move do you play as black? What are you going to do? Hopefully you've had time to pause your video. Well, let's see what Kieseritzky does. He actually undevelops his knight. He's undeveloping. Really, unfortunately for Kieseritzky, it was really his only option. He's got to evacuate the area to give his queen space to survive. If he hadn't have done that, he wouldn't have been able to save his queen. Pretty crazy. So now white is in kind of it looks like an awkward position, but they're developing their pieces very nicely. Meanwhile, look at all of this. What are we? 15 moves? Yeah, 15 moves into the game. And the only piece that he's got out there is his queen. So, and this guy's playing in the most prestigious tournament in the world at that time. Pretty crazy how this unorthodox opening, the King's Gambit, which was extremely popular at the time, is working out so well for Anderssen, or at least it seems like it is. So the queen's now threatening this pawn here, and makes sense, right? Developing that knight, that's usually a good move. So Anderssen's doing really good here. He's got several of his pieces. Now he gave up a piece. He's down a bishop here. He's down a minor piece, but he's got a lot more activity with all of his pieces. He is just swarming all over the board, and that gives him the power to do pretty incredible things in this game, as you'll soon see. All right, so Kieseritzky threatens the rook, and a bishop's worth 3 points, rook's worth 5. Almost always you're going to save your rook. So he threatens the queen, threatening the nasty fork. Anderssen attacks the queen, but he's basically inviting the queen to come ahead and grab this b2 pawn and be threatening the rook, threatening check. Pretty nasty looking to ask him to go ahead and do that, and he does. So now the rook is on pre here. If queen takes rook, it's check, and Anderssen plays this move, like attacking the undefended bishop, sure, but the bishop could just take the rook. Or the queen could just take this rook with check. What is he thinking here, right? And so Kieseritzky obliges him and just takes the rook. And this is just incredible. Go ahead and pause your video and think about what Adolf Anderssen's probably most brilliant move of the game. The next move is so subtle and so sweet. So sweet. Pause your video. Take all the time you need. You might want to spend half the day thinking about it because, well, this just ends up being one of the most amazing checkmate combinations in the history of chess. And it has to do with this one so subtle move. Pause your video. Yeah. How many of you found that one? Pawn to e5, it has extreme significance later on, as we're going to see. But what about this? What about queen takes rook? That's going to be devastating. You're going to give up your rook on back-to-back moves? Well, I don't call it an immortal game for nothing. So that's really one of the few options that he had. His bishop is now saved. Anderssen is down 2 rooks and his bishop. He's down 2 rooks and his bishop. And he's going to go on to crush him. He's going to go on to win this game. Yeah, well, look at the piece development. All 3 of these pieces are swarming around the king. Meanwhile, these guys are still got pillows over their head, hiding from the sunlight or something. They're sleeping back here. I guess this guy went out for a little jaunt for a moment and ran home. And that's going to make all the difference here. Just center control, piece development, that's where this game really shines. Just another, he played a bunch of just really bad moves. When you develop your knights, of course, you want to develop them towards the center, and he put his in the rim, and then he took them home. Pretty crazy, pretty sorry example of how to play a chess game from the black's perspective, and just amazing job, of course, for Adolf Anderssen. Go ahead and pause your video and see if you can find Anderssen's final flourish. White to play and checkmate in 3 moves. Spoiler alert, I'm about to reveal. And okay, so checking move there, forcing the king over. The bishop had it covered, so he could not step over. And now we can see the significance of the earlier pawn move on e5 by Anderssen as it blocks the queen's defense of the g7 square. This is a great game. All right, so it's now checkmate in just 2 moves here. So white to play and checkmate black in just 2 moves. You just lost both your rooks. You're down all kinds of material, but there's a mate in 2 here. So go ahead and pause your video and think about it as you like. Alright, hopefully you had a chance to do that. Pause the video. I'm going to go ahead and reveal the brilliant queen sacrifice. Mate in 2, so he didn't have to look all that far. Actually, Adolf Anderssen has another fantastic game with an even better coup de grace checkmate. And then just a simple bishop checkmate. That's game over. So white down massive material, but it was piece activity. His pieces were all developed and it made sense. You know, he was making sure his pieces were active and controlling the center of the board, where Lionel Kieseritzky was not doing that, nowhere near as well as the great late Adolf Anderssen. This concludes my video on the Immortal game. I hope you'd enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned something. This is certainly a game you want to know if you want to be a good chess player. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and hit that like button, and also the notification bell if you'd like to know about upcoming chess videos, as I will be making at least 1 a week. Thank you, and take care.